Does Call of Duty have an identity crisis? We are here to find that out. No, not really. I'm just gonna ramble into a microphone, edit that, and then upload that to the internet. Whatever. Let's just jump straight into it. Hi there, I'm Mono. We're here to talk about Call of Duty as a whole, really, but in relation to Call of Duty Black Ops 6, and I guess Black Ops as the game franchise, game series, whatever you want to call it, right? The main question we are here to ask ourselves is, in actuality, right? This is actually a Warzone hating video that I'm disguising as a Black Ops video. So we want to ask ourselves the question, does Call of Duty have an identity crisis? And is that identity crisis maybe linked to Warzone and its release? Thinking cap. So let's just start. Let's just dive right into it. With the events of Call of Duty Black Ops releasing, I'm talking mostly about the campaign, but I'll bring up some things in regards to zombies because I'm a zombies player, don't play multiplayer. So, some things to maybe begin with. The campaign. In Call of Duty Black Ops 6, the campaign was mostly marketed as a sort of traditional Black Ops experience. Yeah. You kind of have this air of mystery, information that's being withheld by the government or by the army or any other people who might be part of the system. There's air of espionage and uncovering the real truth, and this is not new to Black Ops. There's this whole redacted kind of air about these games, right? How the missions are presented to you. They are presented within the context of, here's a more or less real world setting. We now take this more or less real world setting and we apply a certain kind of unrealistic coat of paint to it, let's say. And all of this is to say that most of the time, Call of Duty Black Ops games aren't afraid to veer outside the realms of realism, which a lot of people would argue is partly the core of Call of Duty's presentation. It presents itself as realistic, with some elements here and there inevitably being related to unrealistic stuff, your ability to sprint, the amount of ammo you carry, all those other kinds of things like that. Those things are unrealistic, but Call of Duty Black Ops in particular isn't afraid to veer into more unrealistic territory, whether that be the character's mindset, their capabilities, the setting that we are currently in, things like that. They are not afraid to speculate on certain things either. And because of that, it becomes a little bit difficult to walk the tightrope that Black Ops has set out for itself. That tightrope being a level of engagement with the world and the characters, and the intrigue level that the spice of unrealistic aspects can bring in, secret organizations that might not or might exist in the real world, weapons that are experimental that might not or might exist in the world, or any other aspects, people, plans, doomsday events, items, all of these things being stuff that might or might not actually exist in the world, and they try and play around with that concept very often. So it's no surprise that Call of Duty Black Ops 6 would try and dive into that field. However, the way they chose to do so, I think, caught many people off guard, because most people, at least from what I know of, the consensus seems to be that it's a pretty decent campaign, but things tend to get a little bit strange closer to the end. And I think that's because of this identity crisis, this apparent influence of Warzone. So I want us to quickly, just for a second, go over what events take place in the campaign, and then talk about what Warzone did to Call of Duty as a franchise, good or bad, and then ask ourselves the question of if these are even connected to one another. So let's get into that. Point number 1. You begin the story as a faceless, more or less, and a voiceless character within Case. I don't know what his first name is, we'll just call him Case for now. And essentially, you are on a mission in somewhere in North Africa, I guess. You're on a mission and you encounter a nice little gentleman who is currently trying to escape from the clutches of what he claims to be the Pantheon. And as soon as those words leave his mouth, you as the character, Case, experience some weird revelation, perhaps some sort of strange feeling passes over you, but you think nothing of it and you continue with your mission. This little gentleman gets offed immediately by Adler, who is at this point in the story revealed to have been going AWOL, right? He's a rogue agent, and he is going against the CIA, but also going against Pantheon. And he gives you a bunch of cryptic lines talking about how neither Pantheon nor the CIA can be trusted, yada yada yada. Intrigue has been built. From then on out, you go back, you report the events that took place, and you now are forced to go off grid and go AWOL yourself to try and uncover what Adler has started. You find a little hidden base that he's been using, and you take that as your own hidden base, and you begin the game proper. Your first couple of missions just see you essentially gathering your team and uncovering the information about what's been going on. What is the connection between the CIA and the Pantheon, and who is kind of pulling the strings in the background, and for what purpose do the Pantheon want to do what they are doing currently in the story. You meet an assassin, you meet a hacker guy person, and eventually, speedrunning the story here, eventually you get to a point of discovering a pathogen that they are planning to use. This pathogen is called the Cradle. This is your one clue to then finding out the connection between the CIA and the Pantheon. So you go back to a base in America where the pathogen was allegedly created, and you go and investigate. As Case, up until this point you have not actually spoken. The game has a strange thing where it sometimes acknowledges that Case has thoughts on particular things, but you as the audience member or game player never actually know what those are, because he never speaks, and there's never like a... some games do this thing where everyone in universe can hear and or understand the character you're playing, but you the player cannot. So a character could go, and another character go, well, no, we're not going to go straight to the compound. And then it goes, what do you mean we can go there? Like, we don't know how we're going to get there. We don't know the location. And then another character goes, it's like, wait, you had this entire time? And they kind of just have a conversation, but you the character, you the player, have no idea what's going on. Sometimes it's a jarring experience and sometimes it works. Your miles will vary. But the point is, we don't really get much of that in any capacity with Case. Sometimes I think he nods or shows a thumbs up or something to that effect, but that's pretty much it. And it's a bit jarring as an experience because the game tries to present itself a little bit seriously, right? There's certain scenes where it's taking itself pretty seriously. So having your character be this really out of place person who never speaks, but everyone in universe pretends as if their interaction is meaningful is very strange, right? It's odd. It's almost as if they didn't have anyone to record voice lines with, and so they just said, okay, we'll just do what we can with what we have. Not saying that is the case, I'm just is the case, but I'm just saying it's just strange to have Case sometimes throw a thumbs up and have everyone in the room be like, we all understand exactly what that meant, and that's pretty much it, even though he's like a main character. I'm not sure what led them to make this decision, but it was pretty strange to get into, I suppose. That being said, you as Case get you are contaminated. The gas mask you were wearing is broken and the pathogen gets to you, and you are now under the influence of the pathogen. The implication is now you are hallucinating, but it isn't quite clear when it is hallucination and when it is actually Case interacting with the physical world around him. I say this because you fight a boss closer to the end of the mission with the hallucinations, and that boss is happening apparently entirely in Case's head, but Case is in a completely different location from where he initially starts the mission. So I'm only led to believe as a player of the game that some aspects of this mission, Case is actually walking through the compound and hallucinating certain events that's taking place or not taking place. But like, for example, he needs to get key cards to be able to access the elevator. I assume him actually having the key cards and accessing the elevator, those are real. But like the zombies you have to fight to get the key cards, and zombies you have to encounter before you get onto the elevator or during your ride on the elevator, those aren't real. Stuff like that I can't exactly tell, which makes it a pretty jarring experience, doubly so. But from this mission onwards, you kind of discover the nature of the Cradle, and you get some information about Case, who is revealed to be something of a super soldier and a failed experiment subject of the Cradle before it got turned into a bioweapon pathogen thingamawatsit. All that being said, you eventually find out that one of your best friends, lady, spoiler alert, the best friend, she is a mole for the Pantheon. She's been working for them. She doesn't trust the CIA. And you go on a mission to go and find her, get her, take her back to your base, and you interrogate her. From there, you go into a little mind palace under the influence of a truth serum kind of drug, and you try and convince her to assist you. While that is happening in her mind palace, you play as, I think, Case and Troy Marshall, right? I think you play as both of them. I'm not entirely sure now anymore, but you basically defend the compound that you are in from the Pantheon because there is a tracker on your little lady friend, and they are now coming to get her and kills you. This is basically the last mission that you play in the game, where she escapes, and you get onto the helicopter that she is escaping on. You get into a scuffle with her, the helicopter crashes, and eventually you're supposed to kill her. I did try in my playthrough to not kill her just to see if there's anything else that could happen, but I guess you're just forced to kill her, and from there a cutscene plays, and it's like everything has been tied up in a neat little bow, and eventually you get this guy sitting in front of a computer, and I'm going to guess that is Case. I haven't looked at any reviews for this game. I haven't looked at any people talking about this game. So this is just completely my guess. I could be wrong. This could be a different character. But I'm guessing the last dude you see who's looking at the computer screen or the monitor in front of him, that guy is Case, and he's supposed to be doing some spy stuff. I don't know. Anyway, that is basically the story. So the problem with how the campaign is being presented is that initially you would have been under the impression and the illusion that the stuff to do with Case being a super soldier and the hallucinations that he's under the influence of throughout one of the missions, the mind control that he seems to be under the influence of throughout the events of the game, and the mind palace things that you have with the Pantheon CIA double agent lady, I forget her name now. I actually dislike the fact that I did, but all these characters essentially having this mind-bending events take place feels a little bit outside the realms of what you would expect, and I feel as though there were ways that they could have presented both those instances in a capacity that would have been perfectly acceptable, maybe even praised. For example, Case alternates throughout the mission, searching through the facility filled with the cradle. He hallucinates and alternates between seeing zombies and zombie-like creatures and mannequins that move every time he looks away from them, right? And I kind of feel like they should have just gone with one or the other, in my preference being the mannequins idea, and then maybe just introduce sort of other kinds of experimental boss types that he could have faced off against, instead of just reusing bosses from the zombies game mode. Now, I'm not saying that that is bad on its own. I'm just saying that would have been a preference of mine, because I feel it kind of jarring to have these manglers, have the abomination, and have the mimic appear in the campaign in the way that they do, and just have that be what, like, the game's just like, yep, now you're fighting a mangler anyways, and that's it. It just doesn't feel like it's cohesive with the world, right? It feels like you know about this creature from zombies, and here it is now once again. And I also felt this way back in Black Ops 3, when we also had the zombies appear in that campaign. So it's not like I'm trying to be inconsistent or trying to say it's okay there, but it's not okay here. I didn't like it that back then either. It's unfortunate I didn't have a YouTube channel back then, otherwise you would have known probably that complaint. But take my word for it. So the presentation is the issue here. I think, for example, with the Case situation, he should have just had straight up an hallucination. The mission should have started with him being contaminated, falling unconscious, and then very obviously waking up in a dream sequence. When you play throughout the dream sequence, you unlock more and more of Case's memories and the events that have played out in the facility, have him use the grappling hook in the dream sequence and all sorts of things like that, and eventually wake up and he's back at the compound with his homies. I don't know what the name of the compound was. Was it Bishop or Rook? Was it either of the chest pieces? I wonder. But anyways, have him wake up there and then have them say, you've been unconscious for like a day. And that would have been perfectly fine, I think. Most of the audience members who would complain would maybe just be complaining about the nature of the dream sequence, but not how it slots in or how it fits into the story at large, or the world, or the presentation of the story and its realism, etc., etc. So I think that kind of addresses a minor problem here, right? This game presents itself as something like an action spy thriller, and there are certain instances where I feel they wanted to do something but refrained. Case in point, the grappling hook. I think that they should have just started the game introducing the grappling hook, and it would have been perfectly fine if you just made a James Bond style story. Just make it that certain missions allow for you to use a grappling hook and certain missions don't. It could have been just that simple. Some missions where you need to break into a specific place, you can't use a grappling hook. It makes a noise. It's a pressurized wrist-mounted gauntlet gun thing, right? It's going to make a noise and people will be alerted to your presence. So you're not allowed to use a grappling hook. You need to find a different way to enter the facility, enter the compound. Some missions will not have anything useful to grapple. And that's pretty much it. You can just make it be, or make it that, for example, you only have certain uses of the grappling hook. It has a certain amount of gas in its pressure gauge, valve thingy, what's it, and you can only use it a certain amount of times and then it's done. You need to refuel it, or it can get damaged throughout its use, and therefore you need to be careful of how you use it. Make it a resource that you need to manage. Much like your guns, you can't just go out guns blazing. You will run out of ammo at some point. There are other disadvantages as well, but this is just some that they could have done. But I feel like it's because they have this identity crisis that they didn't add a lot of the more James Bond style spy gear, even though very obviously they wanted you to get that experience out of the game. I point to the grappling hook, the camera that you get throughout the game, and the entirety of the I don't know if it was actually at the Pentagon, but there's a party that you go to where you try and get to the facility beneath the state building that you are in. At this party, it feels very much like you're playing out the events of a movie, you know. You James Bond just entering a casino, you're trying to find the main villain and find information about what the main villain is trying to do. It feels to me like most of the time as well, it's not as fulfilling to complete these missions, because a lot of the times you go in stealthily, you do everything right, but then it ends out with a firefight. Basically, every mission that can be approached through stealth will end with a firefight. And it feels like that mentality comes from the fact that Warzone exists. So let's get into what I mean. With the advent of Warzone back in 2020-2019, Call of Duty as a franchise was more or less revitalized from the grave. Most people didn't talk about this outside of circles that already played and liked Call of Duty, so they weren't getting that many new people into the game. And because a lot of people had the impression that each Call of Duty game was lower in quality than the previous and cost more or the same amount as the previous, most of their reputation was basically in the gutter. That was until the free Battle Royale game, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Warzone, was released. This exploded into the scene. It allowed for many new people to get into Call of Duty who never got into it before, and it introduced a concept that most Battle Royales don't use, that being the Gulag. You see, the Gulag allowed for, as opposed to most Battle Royale style games, where you go into the match, get equipment, get armor, get gear, or any other means that will assist you in surviving and eventually winning, because the point is the last man standing or last team standing wins. What Warzone introduced was the concept of a gulag. Each time you died and your allies were not able to revive you, you would transport to the gulag, where you'd go on one final stand against an opponent, another player, and the winner would be allowed to return to the game. This allowed for people who were not that good at the Battle Royale style game to more easily adjust and get into Battle Royale style games. Because before, if you died and your allies couldn't revive you, that was pretty much it. It's either you leave the game or continue spectating. Spectating wasn't very fun, so most people would just quit game and re-queue, hoping for a new team and hoping for a better experience. That was pretty much it. So Warzone had its advantages, it had some good things that it did. It introduced a lot of different kinds of concepts to the game, planes, vehicles of different kinds, weapons of different kinds, certain game modes, etc, etc. I'm not going to sing the praises of Warzone too much, but I do like it. I just also don't necessarily know if I like the direction that it's taking Call of Duty. That direction being favorability towards a shorter attention span, favorability towards more bombastic concepts, more flashiness as opposed to actual substance that comes in the form of cosmetic skins for your operator, blueprints for your weapons, attachments for your guns, tracer shots for your bullets, death effects, death kill animations, or whatever else you want to call that, the finishing moves that the characters do, certain aspects of game modes that some people dislike, and I liked it, but I understood the plight. Certain game modes that were introduced through the boys crossover, for example, where you were able to obtain temporary superpowers throughout a match. Certain crossover events like the boys or the Godzilla vs. Kong events, all these things feel to me like an appeal towards a newer fan base, an appeal towards people who might not necessarily like Call of Duty for what Call of Duty has to offer, but more so for what Call of Duty will collab with next, what the next skin might look like, what the next weapon upgrades and attachments and blueprints might do in terms of the performance, what's the next bombastic feature in the map or anything else like that, right? Feels like that. And I feel that that extends to the other game modes such as campaign, where every single mission essentially needs to end in a firefight. It doesn't feel as though your input as the player really matters, and maybe it shouldn't, but at least then you should create the impression that this was always going to happen, not make me stealth my way through an entire mission only for the end of the mission to force me into an interaction where I need to get into a firefight. Maybe you should just make it that I bust into the facility guns blazing to begin with. Maybe you should allow me to then have a bigger team of people, not just 5 dudes, but like an actual team of operatives who will enter the facility and go there guns blazing, give them access to certain weapons and stuff to justify them going in guns blazing. Maybe make it that the enemies that they're going up against in these missions where they go in guns blazing are not as capable of combat at the moment. Perhaps they're recovering, they're licking their wounds or something like that, and so they are not as combat ready as you are when you infiltrate and take them down. Maybe you should make the object of the mission not just based off of finding a particular item, doing a particular this and that, only for the alarm bells to go off as soon as I get that item, because then it makes it feel like the characters are incompetent because they didn't account for the fact that the item they're trying to obtain might set off some alarms, or they didn't have a proper escape route and now we're just in a firefight hoping for the best. Just, things like that. I think that creates a little bit of dissonance. Now, Warzone as a game mode, however, isn't all bad. But I think when we're talking about the idea of if Call of Duty has an identity crisis, one needs to talk about the fact that a lot of older fans of Call of Duty don't really appreciate Warzone and what it has done for Call of Duty, right? A lot of them view things that Warzone does or introduces as bad, regardless of if it is or isn't bad. They will still view it as being bad, and it's very difficult to reason with someone like that. But the point still needs to be made. Call of Duty Warzone has a specific loop that they want to introduce, and Call of Duty Warzone does challenge the notion of realism within Call of Duty, because if you do have Homelander alongside Nicki Minaj, alongside Snoop Dogg, alongside Michael Myers and Art the Clown, all of these people jumping into a match together, about to just slay everybody in the lobby and stuff, it does seem odd when you then get the guy on the comms being like calling in UAV strike, and that's just the same kind of interaction as it is in other Call of Duty games. Like, as if Nicki Minaj being on the battlefield right now is just normal. This is just another Thursday. Call of Duty might not necessarily be the best medium to have this happen with, right? Something like Fortnite, you can forgive a little bit, because when Fortnite started out, they had knockoff versions of something like John Wick, knockoff versions of something like Deadpool, knockoff versions of something like Master Chief. I'm not entirely sure about the Master Chief one, but just run with it, right? The point I'm getting to is that they had essentially like this parody equivalent of existing IP. So when you get the actual crossover of John Wick and look at that John Wick skin in comparison to the knockoff John Wick, there is almost a certain kind of celebration to be had that they actually managed to do it, guys. Now, I'm not that excited about the notion, but that's what someone might think if they are interested in Fortnite for those reasons. These things might seem like accomplishments. The Fortnite style also doesn't take itself as seriously. The Fortnite style in of itself is cartoony and doesn't try to appeal to a realistic presentation compared to something like Call of Duty, which does. Remember, everything in Call of Duty is still packaged as though it is realistic, right? Boots on the ground warfare, except sometimes King Kong might show up, That's sort of what happens, which creates a bit of a disconnect between what you expect and what you actually receive. And Warzone has contributed to that immensely. I understand why, right? Because if I have an XM5, I don't know if it's XM5 or XM4 right now, but if I have an XM5, let's just say, right, and I have a blueprint for it that turns it into like a sort of ivory-looking cowboy aesthetic to it, right? Then, if I need to be incentivized to buy another blueprint for that same XM5, you might want to either create some sort of performance difference between the weapons, or you might want to make it even more aesthetically appealing to someone like me, and you might have to throw a bunch of spaghetti against the wall and just see what sticks. So now you make a blueprint for the XM4 that just sees it turn into like some sort of parasitic biomass bone-flinging weapon thing that has like this super unique animation whenever it kills someone, right? They have like a death splash effect that just does something interesting. Maybe you want to do that to try and incentivize someone like me who already has a pretty cool looking skin and blueprint to buy the new one. I understand those things. But because there is that constant need and desire to up the ante, I feel as though that belies the issue. That points to the problem of style over substance. So we get back to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and how the campaign is presented with style over substance. One of the things that I might want to point out is that I might be wrong about this. Please verify on your end of things. But I think it is basically stated that Case is a super soldier. He's stronger than most people. He's faster than most people. But his gameplay doesn't feel different to any other game in the Call of Duty franchise. He doesn't seem to run faster. He doesn't seem to be able to jump higher or anything else like that. His performance seems exactly the same as everyone else's. If he has an infinite sprint, the other guys seem to also have an infinite sprint or something close to that, right? So I don't know. Like, for example, his ability to recover from damage. He can recover, right? Somebody shoots him in the arm, bang, 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 the screen gets covered in blood, it goes all red and blurry, and the heartbeat effect kicks in, and he then eventually recovers. That's not different to other Call of Duty games. It's not like in other Call of Duty games, you don't have health regen. So it's more so just something that they state to you. Oh, he's a super soldier. So that's like the style over substance. They just want you to think this guy is really good and really cool, but he has nothing that actually indicates that in the game itself. It's just people who say that that is the case, and I guess we need to accept it as the audience, which is just a bit odd. Another example of style over substance is the fact that a lot of missions just end with a firefight. It doesn't really matter how stealthy you are. And some of it feels as though there was an attempt to maybe go down an alternative route if you went through stealth. There's one mission in particular in the snow where you have to like kind of do different things. Like you can choose to sabotage the base in different ways. And I feel as though that might be the closest indicator to proving that there might have been an attempt at some point, or at least the idea at some point to have maybe branching paths in any particular mission. Because stealth in this game seems to be a focus, but I don't think you really need to stealth most of the missions. I would want to go back and do another playthrough of the game and just go in guns blazing every single time just to see what happens, but it doesn't feel as though you're missing out on anything. And likewise, you get something like the upgrade system in the campaign. Once again, something that feels more like style over substance. And I don't think this comes from Warzone. I think this is just something they thought they wanted to add. I don't know. But once again, I don't think I used most of the upgrades. And I don't think I missed out on most of those upgrades. And when you introduce a upgrade system, a skill tree, or anything else like that, you want your player to at least feel like there are valuable things here. They shouldn't end the game feeling as though 80% of their skill tree wasn't useful. Now, unfortunately, a lot of games do that. But the overall point is, I never felt like I was missing out on anything. Likewise, I never felt like acquiring my team, what was this? Is it Savati, the assassin lady? Like, her ability to disguise herself doesn't become relevant in your actual gameplay. I would have really liked if they did a Hitman, Agent 47 type thing, that once you recruit her onto your team, right? If we did have the branching paths, that is, right? That you could either choose to recruit her or choose not to recruit her, or your actions could directly affect whether or not she joins you, right? And if she did join you, you would then be able to do stealth missions more easily, more readily, because you were able to disguise yourself as people. So you would be able to gain access to certain locations and be able to sabotage your enemies in ways that was otherwise impossible. Likewise, maybe the hacking feature should have only been introduced and be usable if you have Felix on your team, and if you manage to have Felix actually join you, you convince him to join you, you should be able to access things like cameras, things like passwords and key cards and stuff like that. It should be stuff that are available to you because you completed a mission that allowed you to make the correct decisions or incorrect decisions to afford you these resources. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And maybe Call of Duty isn't best suited for something like that, but I just don't see why I spent some missions trying to recruit these people into the team. It doesn't feel to me like they were very relevant to the actual ability to complete the story as a player, I mean, right? Because every mission ends with a gunfight, so stealth from the Savati assassin lady, I think her name is Savati, I could be wrong, but the assassin lady, stealth from her wouldn't be useful, right? Because every single time the mission ends with a gunfight. This hacking guy doesn't really help that much either, because there's not that many instances where I'm personally hacking in a way that he assists, because I already had the ability to hack things and stuff. All in all, I would just get to the idea and the notion that I don't think that a lot of things about the campaign were influenced by actual gameplay mechanics, or at least there was ideas before, but they have since been removed, oversimplified, streamlined, or anything else like that. And I think that that is a result of Warzone, this whole streamlining of certain things. Another case to point is the HUD, the heads-up display. This shows, for anyone who isn't very familiar, it will show you your ammo count, the amount of equipment pieces you have, the amount of score streaks you have, the general state of your HP, and the armor you have. Now, this is relevant because most Call of Duty games never had this up until more or less the introduction of Warzone. It was a little bit before that. I believe Call of Duty Black Ops 4 actually is the one that introduced this concept, specifically in zombies. I don't know about the other game modes because I've never played the game and I've only ever seen zombies gameplay. However, this was still an effect that you could argue came from Battle Royale in general, because around the events of Call of Duty Black Ops 4 was around the time that they were trying to mimic a lot of Battle Royale game modes. They were trying to mimic Fortnite in particular, I believe, with their Blackout. It was Blackout, right? And because of that, it necessitates having a health bar, having armor, things to that effect. So they just bled into other game modes. And those failures of Blackout then became Warzone. So one could still make the argument that it's not Warzone's fault, but Warzone is still a part of the problem, right? The HUD becoming what it is more reminiscent of Warzone than it is of the campaign of normal Call of Duty games, Black Ops games as well as it bleeding into multiplayer and zombies. This, I feel, is because there is an attempt from Activision's side to more and more funnel in players from other game modes towards Warzone, or in the reverse, get some Warzone players to be more invested in the actual purchasable product of Call of Duty. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I won't really try and comment on that too much in an idea. But in practice, what ends up happening is we get this effect of trying to please so many different people that you end up pleasing nobody, because all the fans of the franchise don't feel like they're being catered towards, they don't feel like they matter, and they don't feel like anyone is actually listening to the complaints that they have. What I would use as my evidence is, around the time that Warzone came out, I distinctly remember a lot of people online complaining and asking that Warzone be separated from Modern Warfare as a game, as an IP. Make them completely different projects, make them completely different products. That was not something that happened. In fact, the Call of Duty launcher soon became a thing, which meant that we now had Warzone as a part of the traditional experience indefinitely. And many people were upset by that. Many people were happy by that. Whichever side you want to take, I don't really mind, don't really care. The point is, Activision made that choice, and Activision seems to be making choices like that rather often. That is to say, they are catering towards trying to appeal to a broader audience while still trying to kind of drag along their older fan base by trying to present something like Black Ops 6 in the sense of, hey, look at this more traditional experience, only to sort of give us a not so traditional experience closer to the latter half of the game, right? Because the first half is front loaded with, yeah, this is just normal Call of Duty, this is just normal Black Ops, it's pretty enjoyable, a lot of cutscenes, a lot of dialogue, but it's fine. It's, you know, you can appreciate this, and then it gets really out there, really supernatural, really bizarre, really time bendy, mind bendy. It gets pretty absurd, and I feel as though that's because there is this attempt to then appeal to this Warzone crowd who you're trying to lure in to this game mode, right? And when they go, oh man, this is getting boring, you introduce a firefight at the end of a mission, an explosion, a big set piece of some kind, or some sort of mind game that the character's going through, that, oh guys, look, there's zombies now, oh no, there's duplicates of me who are like doing this weird sped up animation thing that they like to do when they want to make something seem creepy. All of that to try and appeal to most likely a Warzone player who isn't really into Call of Duty, at least in the traditional sense. This also seems to come across in something like Zombies. Can't speak to multiplayer, so I'll point to Zombies. In Zombies, a lot of the appeal that I found, and I think a lot of people agree with, is the air of mystery that comes with Zombies. There are no health bars, there are no damage indicators, there's no way to know how much damage you've incurred and how much damage you've dealt to zombies, which meant that in a certain sense you had to figure out which weapons were good or not for which round and get a general idea of when would be the most ideal time to pack a punch. You also didn't know exactly what the perks did unless you looked up the exact details online or stress tested them, but it wasn't that difficult to figure out. For example, Juggernog most likely did increase the amount of health you had or how much damage you could take because it had the little health plus sign that we as gamers associate with your HP, right? Now, in terms of the plus sign, we often associate that with healing because of hospitals, medicine, such and such, but we can at least get an implication that this affects my HP in some capacity. Quick Revive kind of does what it says on the package. Stamina Up kind of does what it says on the package. Speed Cola is a little bit more obscure, but the image is literally a magazine of a gun, and it's pretty noticeable how quickly you reload after you get Speed Cola. So that's that. Double Tap was a little bit more complicated because Double Tap 1.0 just increased the rate of fire, even though Double Tap kind of creates a different impression when you hear it. And Double Tap 2.0 does what you would expect, right? It kind of makes it that 2 bullets fire out instead of 1. And as well, as a bonus, it increases your rate of fire. The point is, this was not things you would just know hopping into a game of zombies. In the modern era, that is something you can find out before you even hop into a game of zombies. You just go to the perk cola tab and look at what each perk does, what each augment does, etc, etc. And those things are really useful to have. Those things are really useful to know because you can then understand the exact strengths and weaknesses of each and every perk and make a decision based off of that. Perfectly fine. But the philosophy is what I'm trying to point out. I feel as though that is made that way to appeal to Warzone, because the way that the loadout tab looks in Zombies is remarkably similar, at least in philosophy and what it's trying to achieve, to Warzone, right? And good or bad, I feel that shows that there's an influence of Warzone on even something like Call of Duty Black Ops Zombies. Now, to make it easier for a new player who hasn't played Call of Duty Black Ops, they might then want to know what something like Juggernog does. So their solution to this was in-game, you can have text hover next to the perk cola machine and just tell you how much it costs and what it does for you. Now, again, this is not too much of a problem. This is not too big of an issue. I don't really mind that much, but it feels indicative of the philosophy. When, for example, in game, you have default settings that show you health bars of zombies, that show you how much damage you do, that shows you quest markers, where you should go, what you should do next. There's even a directed mode that assists you in completing Easter eggs, which I really like. I haven't tested it out just yet, but I really like it because I don't do Easter egg hunting. I don't normally complete Easter eggs. I just go into the nearest video, watch the "Hi guys, Mr. Waffles here," and then I copy what he does in the video. That's it, right? And that might not be the best experience, but I don't think adding a directed mode is any better than that, even if it's useful. Adding a way to change my HUD to look more like a traditional zombies experience isn't that useful. Adding a map to zombies, like a mini map, like adding a traditional map is okay, but a mini map? Bro, what is the minimap going to tell you other than there are zombies nearby? Yeah, this is a zombies game mode. I know that there are zombies nearby. This isn't actually as useful as one would think, but it's familiar to a Warzone player and would be easier for them to digest, right? And it's not, again, it's not a bad thing. It's not a wrong thing to try and funnel in players from other game modes. But when it feels as though the identity of that game mode changes as a result, going to something like zombies, a lot of things are simplified, a lot of things are streamlined. Something even as simple as getting a wonder weapon, a buildable wonder weapon, straight out of the mystery box, that's odd. I feel as though I can't speak if this is actually the case, but I feel as though historically, the only way to get a buildable wonder weapon in the mystery box is if you've already built the weapon and then you lose the weapon, you trade it out for a different weapon. You could then get it in the box because that's where it would then default to. But to just be able to go to Liberty Falls and straight up pull the jet gun straight out of the mystery box, no need to build it at all, that feels odd. It feels useful and streamlined, but it feels like it's trying to cater towards someone whose sensibilities is, as soon as I drop into the map, I want to go to the nearest chest, open it up, and get a weapon. The idea of weapon rarities, the idea of armor, these things come from Warzone. They do not come from the traditional zombies experience. They do not come from traditional any experience in Call of Duty. Warzone was the one that introduced these concepts. And you see that influence on the actual gameplay. How you obtain salvage, for example, how you upgrade your weapons. All these things seem to be more so strongly influenced by Warzone and made in a way to appeal to a Warzone player through familiar gameplay features, familiar gameplay mechanics and modes and appearance. I think that Call of Duty does seem to have something of an identity crisis. They do not know if they want to cater to older fans, loyal fans who might not always spend as much money as someone who plays in the Warzone gameplay loop. Because let's be fair, Warzone saved Call of Duty and Warzone makes a lot of money. It's unfortunate, but it is the truth. It's the truth you have to live with. It's the truth you have to accept. But it does not need to be the truth that the direction they're going in is entirely positive. The direction they're going in seems to be favoring a lack of substance, which means that a lot of their games are going to continuously suffer from one notion, which is essentially a self-fulfilling prophecy. You make the game, release the game, and the game becomes irrelevant a year later, while Warzone continues to thrive and make money. So there will be more and more of a push for development to go to Warzone and improvements going to Warzone, while all these other game modes just sort of get weeded out. All these other game modes just slowly but surely wilt away and get forgotten to the recesses of time. Older Call of Duty fans might have to move to other games that they more so appreciate and enjoy, and they might feel wronged for the fact that they feel like they made Call of Duty what it is today, and now they need to go and find a different game that they need to uphold, and they need to create a community and culture surrounding only so that it may also chase the easiest way to make money while not delivering on substantive gameplay features, substantive gameplay loops. And it's just unfortunate. But tell me down in the comments down below, do you think that Call of Duty has lost itself? Does it have an identity crisis? Is Warzone entirely bad? Am I just trying to be a fence sitter right now? Is Warzone actually the greatest thing to happen to Call of Duty ever, and I'm just trying to downplay that? Is microtransactions even that bad? Who hates microtransactions? You're probably broke. Tell me what you think down below. I've been Mono, and I am signing out. See you later, folks. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it was informative. Hope I didn't sound like I was being too favorable to one party or the other. Unfortunately, I do have my bias as an older Call of Duty fan, so I come from that perspective, but I do try and still be understanding of the perspectives of someone who appreciates Call of Duty for what it is today, in particular Warzone. I have plenty of friends who play the game, and I play with a few of my friends quite often. So it's not like I hate Warzone as a game mode. I do participate in the thing that I am technically criticizing. Anyways, I've been Mono. See ya.